Abby's Birds by Ellen Schwartz, illustrated by Sima Shefrin. New house, new backyard. Abby dashed outside. She sniffed a violet, tapped every fence post, threw her ball up higher, and chased it under a tall leafy tree. House sold. "Oh," she said, "who are you?" An old woman was sitting in a wooden chair in the next door yard, round faced, wrinkled faced. "I am Mrs. Naka." "I'm Abby." "How do you do, Abby? Are you my new neighbor?" "No, you are my new neighbor. I have lived here a lifetime." "Are you old?" "Very old." Mrs. Naka smiled. Her face crinkled like tree bark. A bird landed in the grass near them, brownish gray with a brick red chest. It stabbed the grass and speared a wriggling worm, rose and vanished into the leaves. Abby heard a rustling, a quiet chirp. Mrs. Naka said, "Robins have been building nests in the maple tree for as long as I can remember. Come and I will show you." Leaning on a cane, Mrs. Naka limped slowly. Abby made her steps go slow too. "Why do you have a cane?" "My bones are fragile, like the birds." Abby thought of Mrs. Naka's bones snapping like slender birds' bones. She took Mrs. Naka's hand. Holding tight, Mrs. Naka pointed with her cane. Abby looked up. All she saw was leaves and shadows. "There it is, straws and twigs woven into a brown bowl. Are there babies?" "Soon, very soon." Mrs. Naka's hair was loose, the brush moving in long downward strokes. She removed a tangle of white hair from the brush and let it go. Just before it floated to the ground, a robin plucked it out of the air. "I want to give a hair too," Abby said. She tugged off her elastic, and curls sprang free. "Ouch!" She flung the hair upward. The robin swooped and snatched it. "My hair will be in the nest with yours." "A pillow for the baby birds," Mrs. Naka said. Abby colored her paper resting on the arm of Mrs. Naka's chair. The baby robins squawked hungrily from the treetop. Back and forth flew the mamma and papa carrying insects. Mrs. Naka held a piece of paper, fingers remembering. Then she began to fold. Abby looked up. "Oh, Mrs. Naka, what is it?" Mrs. Naka moved the folded paper down and up. Wings rose and fell, rose and fell. "It's a bird." "Yes, Tori." Abby's small fingers tried to copy Mrs. Naka's nimble ones. Her folds were crooked and the paper crinkled. Clicking her tongue, she smoothed out the paper and folded again. Finally, she had a small, tattered bird. Abby took the two birds, one in each hand. She moved her arms up and down. The birds soared on breaths of air. "They're flying, Mrs. Naka." "Yes." Abby ran her arms tracing great billowing curves. "Watch the Tory fly." A baby robin lay beneath the tree, one wing bent like a broken fan. "What happened?" Abby's voice trembled. "It wasn't strong enough to fly," Mrs. Naka said. "Is it dead?" "Yes." Abby burst into tears, pushing her face into Mrs. Naka's waist. Later Abby dug a shallow grave and she placed a violet on top of the fresh dirt. "Are the other babies safe?" "Yes, they are strong and they will be able to come back next year to raise their own babies." "New babies every year?" "Year after year, always." That night Abby dreamed she was a baby bird. perched in the rim of the nest. The ground was bare, the sky was vast, and she lifted her wings. Flying, Abby didn't see Mrs. Naka climb onto a chair. She didn't hear the crash as the chair toppled, and she didn't see the papers spread like rainbows from Mrs. Naka's outflung arms. Sirens got loud and then louder. Abby ran outside, and attendants were carrying Mrs. Naka to the ambulance. "Mrs. Naka, what's the matter?" "I fell, and my hip is broken." "Will you be home soon?" Mrs. Naka sighed. "Not soon. First my bones must mend." Tears trembled on Abby's lashes. Mrs. Naka wiped Abby's cheek. "But I will come, Abby, home to you and our tree." "And the birds?" "Yes." Mrs. Naka held out a sheaf of paper. "For you, for Torry." As summer faded, Abby practiced. She folded and unfolded. The baby bird's chest turned from speckled to brown to orange. The chicks grew as big as their parents. The maple leaves fell, and one day a robin flew away, and then another, black and orange smudges overhead, flying toward the sun. Abby made birds, turquoise, violet, red. Soon the branches were bare, and the robins were gone. On the day that Mrs. Naka was coming home, Abby carried folded papers and loops of string outside. Her mamma and papa held the ladder for her. When she was finished, Abby waited by the gate. She looked up the street and down the street. "Mrs. Naka, you're home." Mrs. Naka's eyes disappeared into her smile. "The birds flew away," Abby told her. Mrs. Naka sighed. "No more birds until spring." "Come see." Abby pushed Mrs. Naka to the maple trees. There, dangling from bare branches, were birds, lavender, gold, and pink, crimson, emerald, and silver, a flock of Tory, soaring, swooping, gliding. "See, Mrs. Naka, we have birds." Mrs. Naka's arms rose like wings. Abby caught her hands, and they flew.